Hello, everyone. Welcome to the nightly storative check-in via the National Parents Union. I am Dr. Enjolie Laferie. It is January the 15th. I have to look. I don't even time continues to not mean much, right? So we're only not even 3 weeks in, 2 weeks into the year. And I'm feeling that loss of time and space. In fact, it makes me think about, so one of my colleagues, Judith Yanes, she and I do the Spanish show in the mornings. She has said that to her, she feels like the pandemic has given us the opportunity to decolonize our relationship to time, right? And when we talk about decolonizing, we talk, it means returning back to this pre-colonial, right? And this original way that we oriented to time and space and structure and other things. You can decolonize anything. But for her, the lesson she learned in the pandemic is one of we're given the opportunity to decolonize our relationship to time because we're forgetting, right? We're not connecting to the calendar. We're not connecting to time and space in the same way we did when we had to run around and be somewhere. And I think that when I forget the date, that's what it tells me of how the meaning of time is shifting for me. So anyway, long explanation, but I wanted to give it that context. Okay, so I am here on Autumn Land in this beautiful Sonoran Desert in Arizona. This show is the brainchild of Marisol Queveda Rerucha. She hosts the shows on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then I come in and I host on Fridays. And when I think of the reasoning for this show of the nightly restorative check-in, to me, I picture the things that I wish I was doing on a Friday, so basically what I try to do after this. So I want to be hanging out with people that I love, a small number, one or two, I've turned into a big old introvert over the pandemic. But so I want to hang out with one or two people that I care about. I want to eat some good food. And it's that time to have that relaxing conversation or that check-in where somebody gets to really ask me and I them, how are you, in that deep, how are you kind of way. So we want to provide that for families, for caregivers, for educators, right? For anyone who needs that. So I originally came onto the show as a guest with Marisol, and she brought me on because I'm a hypnotherapist and a psychologist. And on that first show, we introduced the breathing technique titled 4-7-8. So every show we start with that. Marisol does, so do I. So we're going to do that. So let me explain 4-7-8. You are inhaling for 4 seconds, holding your breath for 7, and then exhaling for 8 seconds. And you do that 4 times around. And when you're exhaling, you're actually it's this kind of unique thing of you're holding your breath, but then also letting it out. What you don't want to do is you don't want to do a big exhale. You don't want to do a big dump. You want to kind of feel almost that tension, like you're working out a muscle and you're slowly releasing a weight. That's how you're exhaling. If at any point you get lost, you get distracted, right? Just listen for me because I'm counting it out and just catch back up, right? With our inhalation of a 4-second count. I also recommend that you close your eyes or that you do something to maybe look down at your lap just to avoid distractions, because visually, right, it's one of the easiest ways for those of us who are sighted to become distracted. Even just now, I just flipped my phone around because I can see messages coming in. And so it doesn't matter that I'm trying to focus on doing the show. Just that little light, right, can distract me and just get me off. Okay. So y'all know I got to calm myself down, right? Because I have all this good intro energy, and then I got to bring it down and change the tempo for us. Cool. I'm excited for today's show. That's probably also part of it. All right. So go ahead and just close your eyes if you're going to do that. Pick a focal point if you're doing that. Just connect by starting off taking your natural breath. And on your next inhalation, inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale. 3, 2, 1. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Go back to your breath, your natural breath. Nice. And that was actually good, you guys. So I wanted to yawn. And that's actually a good indicator that I shifted into my parasympathetic system, that relaxation response, as opposed to that stress response. And yes, I mean, of course, I'm tired. It's busy. It's been an incredibly busy week. But at the same time, the fact of like when we can even get to those yawning places, it means that we've done that little shift. Okay, good. Y'all feel good. I feel good. All right, so let me finish kind of with my introduction and then introduce our guest. So I've talked about who I am professionally, right? It's also really important for me to introduce myself personally and to like ground myself in the communities that I'm accountable to and responsible for. Responsible to. So I'm originally from Southern California. My father is Afro-Cuban or was Afro-Cuban. So we are Taino and Arawak on that side. My mom's from Guatemala, so we are Mayan. So you have met and seen, right, my sister and brother on some of the earlier shows in season 1 and 2. And I'm a mom. You guys also know that I'm a widow. That's another important identifier for me. As far as my local community, I am a member of the Siwapatli Collective. So we focus on Indigenous mothering. Same thing, you all have seen many of my comadres and the people that I work very closely with on this show. So that just gives you, right, a sense of where I am. And also, hopefully you understand now why I think that decolonization is so important, right? Because it's a part of the ways that I'm introducing myself to you. Quick announcements. I want to encourage you to become a member of the National Parents Union. It's free. You just got to sign up, offer your email address or give us your email address. You can get that by going to our website and or connecting through the way that you're watching us now. We have our town hall on February 4th. So that is also something else you can register for. Okay. Yay, done with announcements. Sorry, I'm like totally, you guys, I feel myself speeding through because I'm like, I just want to get to Denise. So today we have Denise Soler Cox. I am so excited to bring her on, and I'm just going to kind of add her to the stream and give you, right, some description of who she is. Hello, Denise.
Hello.
Denise is besides being awesome and amazing, and somebody that inspires me, right? She is a Latina filmmaker. She's a storyteller. She's a public speaker. She has a podcast. She is well regarded by so many for the ways that she uses humor, conversations on identity, specifically around Latinidad. And it's just really genuine and authentic. And that's actually why I enjoy her so much and why I brought her onto the show. So Denise, can you introduce yourself and maybe any other parts of your identity that you'd like to share, and take your time explaining who you are to our audience?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. And thanks for inviting me to join you here today. And welcome to everyone that's listening and who's joining us. I also shared this inside the Project Eñye group. So on the off chance that some people wanted to join us there. So welcome to them as well. Welcome to all of you. So yeah, that's an interesting thing. So definitely it's funny, wife, mom, and friend. filmmaker. I was storyteller, committed that all people experience their own sense of belonging wherever they want to belong. That really is the root of my work. After doing it now for 8 years, I have kind of gotten to a point to realize that belonging is where all my work dead ends. It started in a place that I used to call, or still call, not enoughness, right? Not Latina enough, not a good enough this or a good enough that. And what I realized was that I was most deeply committed that everybody feels like they belong, because if that's like the most aspirational kind of thing that I think a person could think, is a world where people experience belonging and that everyone is committed, that other people feel like they belong. It sounds kind of out there and up in the clouds, but okay, good, not to you. That's great. And so to those that it doesn't, that's what I'm about. To those where it's like, that's a little out there for me. I make films. I push the storyline and important work, important conversations, including one with you, that we had a great conversation. I'm so proud of that episode. Mm-hmm. And, on the Selfish Latina podcast, as well as speaking as well. So yes, all of those things.
Thank you. Yes. And actually that was such a good segue, because I usually like to tell the audience, right, how I know folks, right? Because thankfully, at least we're like 2 seasons in, and y'all, I feel super, I guess, selfish, or I don't know, criada, right? Of just like, I just invite my friends and the people that I love and that I enjoy, and then I go and share, and they're awesome and they do awesome work. And so then I bring them onto the podcast. So the way that we met, is you put out a post early on in the pandemic. Mm-hmm. I don't remember where I don't know. I don't know if I caught it on Facebook or Instagram. She's on both, right? Mm-hmm. And Project Eñye is on both. So anyway, you put out a post and you asked this incredibly thought-provoking question about what we were learning in the pandemic. And I responded, and you selected me, right, to be on your podcast. And that's how this, professional relationship, right, social media friendship started. And like you said, we recorded a podcast for you. It's actually, if anyone wants to go to my website, it's there. But where can they access your podcast?
Yeah, so they can access anywhere that you watch podcasts. You can find the Selfish Latina podcast. And if you're triggered by the name, that means it's working. And so the podcast we named it the first name for the podcast was the Project Eñye podcast. That's season 1. You can catch it, and you can catch me saying, welcome to the Project Eñye podcast. And then we stopped creating podcasts because we made a movie. And then what happened was so many people said, hey, where's your podcast? I want to listen to your podcast again. So we started the podcast again a few years ago, but we wanted to rename it. And I think it was last year, perhaps, or the year before. I can't remember. We wanted to give it a name that would be provocative in all the ways that provocative is good, like in a way that people would say, hang on a second, why did they name that? Because I think there's a lot of things in our yes, rock on, Judith. We all do, right? Don't we all need to learn to be a little bit more selfish? Yeah, I mean, I could say so much about it, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this cannot be the name. I actually don't want this to be the name of the podcast. But for those exact reasons, we decided to name it that. And I remember someone in our Facebook group was like, but why did you have to name it Selfish? We're the farthest thing. And I'm like, because we're talking right now, because it gives us a doorway to talk about this. Like, we shouldn't be so triggered by this word, right? Like Latina, I know we're never supposed to focus on shoulds and all that stuff, but like, to consider the idea that in our culture, we don't give our women enough space for them to feel and experience being nurtured. And, I've heard it so many times in our community. We just don't give ourselves permission. The community doesn't give us permission. And so I kind of wanted to let out the gas a little bit on that conversation and push down the gas on, hey, be a little bit more selfish. The funny thing is, we don't really talk about selfishness in the podcast. We talk about so many other things, but it's just kind of our way of like getting people to potentially listen.
Yes, and that teaser. No, and you said so many important things there of like, yes, I think as as maybe people identify as women. Again, what the show is about, caretakers, educators, parents, right? We aren't often given the opportunity to nurture just ourselves, right? To check in with ourselves. And that's, it's just an extension, right, of what you're doing. Because in fact, the podcast that I was on with you, we were talking about, it ended up being about trauma bonding. So the question was, what are you learning about yourself? And that was one of the realizations that I had made about myself, that there are people in my life that I potentially connect to around trauma. And what that, in a nutshell, what that is, right, is we connect out of all the crazy feelings. We connect out of the drama. We connect. And for me, it's often out of wanting to connect to help,
Mm-hmm.
So kind of the shadow side of being a helper and a healer and a psychologist and all these things is that I'm attracted to people romantically, personally, even my family, right? Of like when something's going on, I have to jump in, but it's at a cost. And I'm starting to learn that. And I'm starting to question, is that the way you want to connect all the time? And on that show, the question was that the way that I wanted to connect romantically, And it was the first time that I felt that pause. So
that is awesome. I mean, how cool is that? Where in life do you get this quality and level of substance in a conversation? And I'm just thrilled that that's what we ended up talking about. And actually, that is one of our, out of that whole series, that was, I think, one of the most popular episodes, because a lot of people can identify with that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and Mika, one of my girls, so she's here talking about, the selflessness, right? That idealization of La Virgen de Guadalupe, right? So she's, Mika's going to be on the show too. There's another friend we're going to bring on, but she is schooling us, right? Oh, hang on. I'm messing up here with how to hide comments. Mika, right, is schooling us and giving us the origins, right, of where we get these ideas of that, as women, as potentially Latina women, if that's how people identify, of why we can't make ourselves too much, why we can't, in an English speaking way, toot our own horn, right? Because we have to be virginal, we have to be quiet, we have to be humble, we have to be serving, nurturing, caretaking. All those things are wonderful things, but if they're at the expense of the full representation of who we are, they're harmful. So let's personalize this so people can kind of start to get to know you. What are some of the ways that you struggle with putting yourself first?
Oh my gosh, I could write a list. It would be so long, which is the funniest thing. I feel like we teach what we need to learn the most, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say the biggest area is in my work. Like I see so much need, and I know you can identify with this. And I want to make sure that we have, lots of content in all different areas, and that we're addressing all the things. So then all the people that follow the project feel like we're serving them the plate that they need, like their medicine. Everybody gets their medicine. And when you're sitting from a perspective of, wow, I can see this group needs this and that group needs that, then it's hard to prioritize. And that is, I would say, my biggest challenge is in prioritizing. When I don't prioritize and I try to, it's kind of like a professional trying to make everyone happy, I guess. Then I'm trying to give at the same level to all the things when really, and that's how we started. When I jumped on, I told you I just picked 2 things this year. Now, my partner, thankfully, I've got a partner who also has 2 things, right? 2 separate things. And so, but I'm just going to focus my energy, like my energy force, on these 2 things, and really have number 1 and number 2. And they're based on revenue and impact. And so, so that helped me a lot. But that's where, if I don't do that, if there's one thing that last year taught me, is there's so many ways that I decided I'm unavailable for a lot of stuff, right? That I was previously available for, and that I have to be okay making an impact in a chosen area so that I can be taken care of, right? And then also the audience can be taken care of, and then delegating to my partner some things, so I hope that answered that question.
It does. Yeah, no, to have that work-life balance. Yeah. And it's, it's funny. I'm like having a reaction to the name of your podcast because I'm like, that's not selfish. That's called self-care. That's called taking care of yourself. That's called, I have another friend, Luana Morales. She was on the show. I love you guys. When she speaks to me, she talks about like having all this delicious space, and like sitting in deliciousness. And I love when she talks about that. And that's what it is to like have delicious space in your day, in your life, instead of filling every moment, and I'm with you. I'm so good for filling every moment. That was, I would say, the second half of last year. That was a part of my lesson and continues to be of why I feel the need to be so busy. And I'll share this. And for me, it was a realization around that if I'm busy, I get to avoid vulnerability a little bit, which is in the moment. Being vulnerable in the moment in real time is hard. Later on, it's easier. So the pandemic has taught us all those things. So I'm with you.
Yeah. And here's what's interesting too, like outside, like if you go into different groups where our community is more other, more less represented, we'll say, selfish is just like, yeah, it's not a big idea. It's not triggering anybody. It's like old news, It's just in our community that it's such a big deal still. And the thing is, I know there's some really progressive thinkers out there that they're like, they're on to the next thing. They get what I'm talking about. But I would say for the most part, it's still something that a lot of people grapple with. And I have a coaching group and for ambitious Latinas that are trying to like ascend and do stuff, right? Like in their lives, things, impactful things for the community. And I will say for every woman in there, and there's almost 50 of them, this still comes up. So even amongst, I'll say, some of the most successful women that are really making strides, it's like the guilt, if I do this for me, it takes away from family. It feels like such an either or, and it feels very real. And a lot of our conversations are, okay, what's option 3? Because these two, like either or is not good,
Yes. And, and I think when we create that false binary, right? Like you said, we're creating it, right? When we create that false binary, we're putting ourselves in a situation where we have to pick and choose sides, right? And we're like, all of us has to fit when like we're so dynamic, we're so multifaceted, right? Yeah. And if we just let ourselves be, right, we would naturally cover this category and that category and that category in our own delicious, luxurious, right, sense of time, right? So I want to make sure we talk about like your movie. So I want to make sure we talk about and the project. And then I also want us to talk about authenticity, which we're doing in a roundabout way right now. Talk to people about Project Eñye and the film. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So this all started with a big idea that I had, like I said, 8 years ago now, which is kind of nuts that time has passed. And the only reason why I point that out is because if you have an idea that you've been sitting on, time will pass anyway. Time was going to pass anyway, right? And so I actually sat on the idea for 17 years. I know that's a shocker. Everyone's like, wait, there's no way she's in her 50s. I'm actually 50 years old. Nobody knows this. This is a fact. And so thank you. I had the idea in my late 20s, and it wasn't until 17 years later that I finally had the guts really to make one phone call. But I decided I was going to make the movie come hell or high water. I was going to give it everything that I had. I gave myself a year. And what I said was, if I don't make significant progress on this project, on this film, I will give it up and I'll just move on. But and so it's noteworthy to say that I had no experience in filmmaking. I didn't know a single filmmaker. I have no degrees or skills or anything in filmmaking, but I was determined to make this film. So 2 years after the big decision to make the film, I was releasing the film in New York City and went on to go on a 4-year tour. Last year was 4th year, and that was virtual, but still it is just unprecedented what happened as a result of releasing the film. And I think the the thing that we talked about in the film was what I talked about in the beginning was belonging, but it's around Latinidad. It's around not feeling, it's like the ni de aquí, ni de allá, that feeling like you're in two worlds, and really exploring it, not as like this thing that I know oftentimes people are like, oh my gosh, you're from two cultures. This is so amazing. Life is so great, isn't it? Except for when it feels like it's not, and when you just want to talk about the parts that are really hard about it. And so myself and my partner, who's an Oscar nominee, thank goodness I found someone who was interested in telling the story with me. We both kind of rode this journey together, and he helped me. And together we told the story as best we could, and it included telling part of my life story and also pieces and parts of many other people's story as well. And so you can see it on the little ticker. You can watch it for free at enyethemovie.com. And specifically what it's about is the first gen Latino that's here in the United States, that's really born here, and so like fully American, right? Parents, though, from a Spanish-speaking country. And so for me, it felt like I was living in two countries. My house smelled different. People spoke a different language inside my house. The artwork on the walls were totally different. The instruments that my parents had, because both my parents very musical, the instruments that they had were different. Everything was different. And then when I left, it was, the American experience and the clash of both of the ideologies. And I was left without like a roadmap. And I always have a joke. I wish that someone would have just said, here you go. This is how it's going to be. We're going to mispronounce our last names. We're going to pretend, we're going to do this. We're going to make sure, you get all the opportunity, but we'll never explain to you like how you might be feeling or what to anticipate or anything like that. And the thing is, of course not. They were struggling too. They were like, trying to give their very best. They were doing their very best, trying to give us a life. And we had moved out of the Bronx to a house in Westchester County that my parents could barely afford. And so it was really that the seeds were really planted at a young age for the film, which is interesting. One of the guys on our team said, I feel like you've been doing this belonging work since you were 6, because that's my first memory of feeling shame around not speaking Spanish well enough and embarrassing my mother at church. And because my Spanish wasn't good enough. And anyway, so, experienced this whole life, then decided to make the film. And then I decided to make my entire life, knock on wood, about this, because it to this day is still the most fascinating topic I've ever stumbled upon. And that is identity and belonging.
So let's just kind of fill in a detail of like, where are your parents from? What countries did your parents come from?
Yeah, so my mom was born in Puerto Rico, in Santurce, and she came to New York City as a teenager. And my father actually was born in New York City, but his father was from Cuba, and his mother was an orphan from Puerto Rico.
Oh wow! So yes, the island split, and then also it's cool to hear that your family's musical, because there's really good music in the movie, at least the parts that I've seen, and so that kind of also explains quite a bit about you too. And I have that connection as well. So, and actually, and you and I also have a grief connection. So that was one thing too that we uncovered in the podcast that we did together. Of that. I love how much joy and energy you bring, right? But the little that I've gotten to know you, I imagine that some of it comes out of, because you also know like great pain. And even as you were talking about just the process of like deciding to make this movie, right? I feel like it's hard, it's challenging. And I've gotten to see you, and I appreciate like how transparent you are of your process of creating content, because like you fight against yourself, like you struggle and you fight against your crew and your people of like, oh, I don't want to share, but anyway, right? Yeah. So talk to us about that process, about where you get to a place to be authentic despite the risk and the struggle.
Yeah. So I always say, like, I'm not sure I don't know that you and I would know each other, or Project Eñye would exist at the level with it is, and then with the audience that it has, without the relationship that I have with my creative partner, Henry. And he is not the Gringo Cowboy. The Gringo Cowboy is a guy that it's what I call my husband, Kevin. If anyone follows me, that's who I'm married to. And then Henry is also a Gringo, but I call him my partner. He's my creative partner. And so, and also, in many, many ways, one of my dearest friends. And he really is amazing at helping me get to the truth, and also helping me feel safe in sharing it. And so that definitely was one of the biggest challenges of making the first film, was some of the choices that we made in the first film I was vehemently against. And there were some choices that actually did not make it, and those are actually in our second film that we're working on right now. But the choices to put the deaths of my father and brother in the film, in the Being Eñye film that anyone can watch for free, were very difficult for me. And I remember at the graveyard, because my dad and my brother are buried right next to each other, and we were in New York. It was a 10-day long shoot in New York, mostly in New York City, and then we went up to Westchester to film some scenes, including this one at the graveyard, which I was not at all excited about. And I remember we're in the parking lot, and it was like the summer, and the lighting. It's like one of those summer days when you just look outside and the sun's wherever the sun is, it's in the perfect place to make the greens green and the blues blue. And it just is, it's like this beautiful, almost sunset time. And I am a total mess. And I'm thinking, this is the worst idea. No, this makes zero sense to add this scene. And oh, Cesar, I'm so glad. I can't wait for you to see it. So I'm not excited at all to be in this scene. I have no idea what's going on. It's just Henry and me and a cameraman. That's it. Just the three of us. And something goes wrong with the audio. And so I was like, that's it. This is a sign. We need to leave. I'm exhausted because we'd shot all day already. And I'm just like, I'm done. I don't want to do this. And then Henry's like, no. And this is just me kind of sharing, like, how did he make this scene happen? And he's like, let's just, it's like this one step at a time kind of ability that he has with me, just to keep me calm. And the audio got fixed. And it was a syncing the audio pack, that my lapel mic with the camera, something that we hadn't had a problem with it all week, but all of a sudden right there was a problem. And so that's a great metaphor for just like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. It doesn't work. This doesn't work. It wasn't my fault, right? But I was totally trying to take that opportunity. So we ended up sitting right in front of the gravestones, and it was such a it was so hard just to kind of get back there and to share about my experience of, going there to visit their grave sites and just talk so authentically. And then, but it ended up being very cathartic for me. Now, fast forward to when the film came out, right? And so, which was 4 years ago in January, and we were in New York City, and I'm like, this makes no sense. Why would I make a documentary, include my life story? Mistake number one, right? That's what Henry's idea was. No, we need someone to follow, and it should be you. And I'm like, worst idea ever, but okay. And then include these horrible things that have happened to me. This is the worst idea ever. And so I remember the night before we screened it in front of 100 like influencers in New York City. And the whole idea was, if they like it, they'll tell other people, and then they'll tell people, and blah, blah, blah. So what happened was, we end up going out to dinner, and on our way back, it was freezing cold, New York City, windy. So I was like, and like all of a sudden it just like hit me. I've been working on this thing for 2 years. This has been a lifelong dream to make this film, or at least since I was 26. And I realized I have made the biggest mistake of my entire adult life. And tomorrow night, all these people are going to see this film. They're going to know everything about me, almost. They're going to hate it. They're going to hate me. And this is just going to be terrible, right? So I never do this, but when our backs are up against the wall and like the vulnerability is going to come out, right? This is what we're all afraid of. I put mine on the big screen. I felt like this, I just cannot express to you how much of a mistake I thought I was making. So I remember we get into this argument on the sidewalk, and I'm like, you know what? Like, we're like in an argument. I'm like, you have no idea what I've sacrificed. And they ended up telling him that, and I don't want to spoil it for everybody, but I made 2 really big financial sacrifices. We'll just put it like that. And you'll learn about it in the film. And he was like, what are you talking about? We end up inside. I share more about those 2 big sacrifices, big financial sacrifices that I made. And then I felt this sense of like a vulnerability hangover, like Brene Brown talks about in her first TED Talk. And I feel like zero power. Like, that has like the hangover is like zero power. So I remember standing up and saying, that's it. I've shared everything with you now. And now I feel powerless. And I literally stood up and I started walking away, and he like pulled his arm out, and he was like, hang on a second, Denise, like, that withholding isn't the source of your power, right? And I was like, no, actually, secrets and withholding are a source of my power. They have been the source of my power. No one knows this stuff. The people that know this stuff are from high school, and they all felt sorry for me. And why would I want to dredge that up? I don't want people to feel sorry for me, right? Sure. And we end up in this really profound conversation about vulnerability being my superpower, and wait until tomorrow night. I'm going to see for the first time. And I have to say, the next night, the film plays, I am mortified still. Like, this is a 24-hour mortification moment for me. And everybody stood up, the lights went on, and people started clapping, and I looked at their faces, and they were wiping the tears from their eyes. And 2 people ran up to the front of the room just to hug me, and just to, like, it was like one of those things, like a total stranger putting their hands on my shoulders saying, thank you so much for doing what you just did. This is amazing for the Latino community. And I was blown away. And here's the thing, I thought that was a fluke. And it ended up happening over 100 more times at over 100 screenings that I attended live in the next 3 years. And then last year was all virtual. But what the point of that story is that after, I don't know how many times thinking, oh, this is a fluke, well, maybe that's a fluke, and this is a fluke, all of a sudden I realized, wait, it actually isn't a fluke. And like, my vulnerability is actually the source of my power, but you could never have convinced me of that before.
Yes. And like I said, in the little snippets that I get to watch of you and your process that you're so vulnerable with, of like, I still see you like struggle with it and fight it. And so I'm saying that to let everyone know that, like, I am so filled up by watching your process, as somebody who struggles with in the moment vulnerability. And I say it all the time because, like, people are surprised, because I'm open, I'm all these things, right? But I'm like, no, y'all, I really like suck at this, I promise I suck like at this. So, but like, the people who are close to me know it,
Yeah.
Because it's hard and you do it anyway, And thank you, right, for sharing that story of like why. And in the story, I hear your resilience, I hear your strength, and I hear, so coming from a psychological perspective, I hear the decisions that we make pretty, usually at early times in our life, but it can be at any time in our lives, of like, I'm going to protect myself because in this moment, this is what I needed to do. And so then I'm going to take that rubber stamp and put it on every other situation, right? Because I need to like hold myself together. And that I definitely have that, and then life goes on and we pick up these other little moments that, like, see, I have to hide. See, I can't share my emotions. See, that's another scenario, and it just, that stamp just gets bigger and fatter and more rubbery and more complex, right?
Yes.
Mika, so you guys, thank you. There's questions coming in and comments, and so I'm like,
awesome.
Time them. But so Mika was talking about, and that dovetails into, right, that imposter syndrome of that, like, feeling that sense that everyone knows that we're a fraud, right? That we're not as good, as smart, as beautiful, as kind, as nice, as put together, as healthy, whatever it is, as a good person as we think we are. And they're going to somehow find us out in the middle of our performance, in the middle of our lecture, in the middle of our film screen, right? And it's particularly strong in people of color, people when you are in a position where you don't see yourself and you're not frequently the person there, but especially right when we're being vulnerable. Let me also include, so I think you answered this question, right? Judith was asking you, what helped you articulate the struggles that you went through? And I think you got there. I just wanted to show the question. Let me let you respond to the multitude of things that I've said.
Oh, yeah. So I think Judith, what helped me kind of tell that, the story that I just told, I think hopefully this will help, is just like being able to, I don't know, like make it real and want to help people with it. Cause I definitely feel like I'm in on something. Like it's not, I have a great privilege to have this film be about my life. Like I said, it's not about all the stuff. The next movie is though. And the thing is that I realized is, as hard as it is, I mean, we have a podcast coming out that is talk about triggering, I almost want to like take if it was a piece of paper, crumble it up and throw it away. Like, I'm not ready for this, but I'm willing to release it. There's so much trust there between my partner and I. I'm like, I pretty much feel like everyone's going to hate me after this. And it's not because I have strong views. It's because I'm sharing such deep pains that I am so nervous to share about. But it's like someone's got to do it, right? And so I just have this incredible trust that those audiences, those faces, I mean, middle school faces, collegiate age faces, corporate America faces, all the different spaces that I've had a chance to speak in, it's just one big group of people that they feel they're so darn appreciative of real. And it's like someone's got to model it. And I don't know how to model it outside of, I often model it through the tears, because I allow myself to feel it, because that's what it looks like. And it's funny now, when I listen to leaders or people speaking about this topic, it goes a long way to hear them stumble a little bit, because the reality is it is really hard. If you're doing it right, it's still hard.
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't go away. I think you just gave us the example of it's worth it, and you're reminding me of this idea. You talked about walking in two worlds and walking or having a foot, for me, in kind of my background, where we talk about having one foot in both worlds or in two worlds. And that's really hard. It's a gift and it's amazing if people can navigate that, but you can feel bifurcated, right? And not enough, or like you're not doing the right thing in one space, right, versus the other. But the gift, or like you said, I think what you're talking about, the gift is when we can show people how to do that anyway and how to walk that walk, because so many other people do in some aspect of their life, definitely, like that's something that I personally, connect with as well.
Yeah. And for me, the issue behind that is feeling misunderstood in both worlds. Like, I don't think they get me here, and I don't think they get me here. And then it's like, okay, how I guess, since I'm pretty much probably going to die feeling like that, I better at some point accept myself the way that I am, and just like be okay with expressing that which may be understood here and that which might be understood there, because I do my best to make the most sense when I communicate and when we share our podcast and our films and such. But it is, I would say, one of my number one concerns is, are they going to get it?
Yes. I do. And you're normalizing, you're normalizing that experience. And that's so important. And Mika's little snarky comment, she's so good. I have to read this twice to be like, what are you saying? And then two, can I show it? But yes, I can. So yeah, that you're so brave. And I agree. And that she loves you because by the motto of, if you're talking behind my back, you're in a good position to kiss my ass. Right? And so, that is in typical Mika fashion. But it's this idea too of connecting back to, if we take that up a notch, like we all need help with being vulnerable. We all need help, right, with sharing how we authentically feel and what our struggles are, because everyone has that struggle of sharing, right? Everyone has a struggle, right? We don't have the same struggles, but a struggle. And to be honest, it's the folks with the degrees and the titles and the positions that sometimes mess it up the most. It is why people respond to you, right? So when I posted that you were going to be my guest, Mika and all these other people were like, "Oh, I'm setting my alarm." Like,
oh, no way! Oh, that's so awesome.
Yes, because it's not common. It is not common. And I just, want to appreciate you for your process, of what you go through to try to get to that place of belonging, and I heard you right now when you said you may never, you may die with the feeling of never quite belonging, I hope not, but I know that we benefit so greatly from your process on your way to striving to get to a place of belonging. So.
Yeah. And the thing is, I guess I was getting to like, it's going to be up to me to just decide. I just do.
Yes.
Right. And that is a painful thought. And I think a lot of people feel like that. Like, I don't know if I'll ever be fully understood, but after living 50 years, it's like, I'm not sure this feeling is going to go away. So I better do the work, love myself anyway, and just decide that I do, right? Because I don't know that I don't know that outside of me, I'm ever going to experience it as fully as that full acceptance of myself.
Yeah. What, as much as you want to share. And so this is an opportunity for a little nugget, of like, what makes that acceptance of yourself so challenging?
Yeah. I think for me, what makes that acceptance of myself so challenging is that it's funny. It seems like it's easier for other people. Right. And I'm sure I know, like, I know, like, what's the word? Like, theoretically, is that it?
Yes.
It isn't. I know it isn't, right? But it seems like that. And, and so it seems harder for me. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it's just like the man's search for meaning. You know what I mean? Like Viktor Frankl, like, there's like the external world has been a challenging space for me.
Yeah.
And so,
yes.
So
I honor the breath, and I'm trying to give you space, like as in like to just feel it and sit with it and to not have to fill it with a word, even if we're on a podcast, even if we're live, like I'm trying to give you delicious space,
Thank you.
Yeah. Like we don't have to perform our way out of like our emotion,
Yeah. So I think, it's funny that that book just pops up. It's such a meaningful book. Perhaps we go through everyone goes through some version of their own personal Holocaust. I don't know. I've learned a lot though in the last 8 years, meeting so many people. There is a lot of pain out there. And if I can just show someone, if my work can lead back to, you know what, if you do the work, and meaning if you can accept and love yourself and believe that you're worthy of all that you want and all that you desire, then, and all the belonging that you yearn for, if that's where the work can end up, then my work is done, right? And I'll also get the gift as well.
Yes, absolutely. I'm thinking so many things. I mean, one, it's connecting to just these really common core feelings we have of not feeling enough, feeling different, feeling misunderstood. And so much of that, I'm giving this to you as something to connect for you. Grief often make us feel that way of like, nope, I'm different. You said, I'm so different. And you keep finding all these people that are the same. You keep trying to look for people to accept you when, like you said, you're the one that's needing to accept you, right? But so many tapes in your life and occurrences have added to like, I'm just different. People aren't going to get me, and we all have that little tape, so in the comments, if people want to put in and be honest and vulnerable back. So this is one thing, when somebody's vulnerable, a good thing is to be vulnerable back with them and to give them feedback. So what are some of the kind of tapes you all have, right, about not enoughness or, kind of like those core issues? I'll share, I'm going to connect with you and follow the recommendation. I think I definitely have something around like, so this is going to be maybe sound unique to people. I often feel alone in my life. And I've been saying that a lot lately, not lonely. I have so fortunate to have so many friends. Like I could call anyone and people would be like, call me, come hang out. I know I can do that. but alone. And that was post grief. So post my husband and my dad passing away, it got exacerbated. It's this existential aloneness. So you bring up Viktor Frankl. That's good because he's an existential therapist, right? Of basically, we just do this thing called life alone, And I remember when my dad and my husband passed, I was like, they left alone and now I'm left alone, right? The two most important men in my life have passed. And so then if I connect that to vulnerability, it's this idea of like, I'm going to be alone anyway, ultimately. So do I really need to work hard to be vulnerable and cultivate a relationship? Do I really need to push myself? Or do I just ultimately fall back on people leave through death or whatever?
Yeah.
People leave.
Yeah.
So I may as well just kind of take care of myself and tuck myself back in, That's my struggle. That's what I'm trying to do my best to work through.
Yeah, I think you and I would be the exact same. I would be the exact same if I weren't a filmmaker telling stories. I have no good reason to do what I'm doing other than the fact that I have a partner that thinks it's a great idea. I mean, I think it's a good idea too, but like, you know what I mean? I get a lot of like pull for more. And it's a weird thing, the setup, since I too would just be like, oh, I don't know, because I have a lot of those same beliefs,
Yeah.
Spend a lot of time thinking about stuff like that.
Well, and to me, so if I can offer my interpretation and my view of you is that like, you said this is your legacy, this is your life's work, And so sometimes, right, I think another thing that I often teach and share with clients is not everything that we feel and not every challenge or struggle that we experience is just for us. I remember one powerful moment I had in my life where I was struggling and I realized that like the lesson the experience was impacting all these other people in my life that were very close to me. And so sometimes we are the tool, sometimes we are the vessel, right? For others to learn through us. You don't have to be that your whole life, right? There's some work we can do if we want to unwind from that contract or that arrangement, but it's not just about us.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. That is really cool. I have to say, I very much feel like that. And I'm surrendering to it. Like, I feel like in this chapter of my life, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, albeit terrifying at times, especially. And I do want to make a footnote. We're releasing the podcast. Podcast is going to be great. And like, it's terrifying sometimes to share. And we're making an entire movie. That in my commentary in the podcast with my partner was, how are we going to get through a whole movie about this when I can't get through a few minutes in a conversation,
But you do it. You do. I mean, you do it like you do it so much, So I'm laughing in this, like, I'm like, Denise, have you seen your pages? You know what I mean? Like, you do it all the time, So it's my desire for you to be able to see yourself in the way that I see you, and I think other people see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
There was a question from Cesar about Henry, your partner, and so I want to go there, and then we'll kind of wrap up after this. But he was asking, what's Henry's film background, and I'll share that Cesar is a big movie buff, and so I know what he's asking.
Yeah. So Henry is one of, I would say, this country's most important documentary filmmakers, and he's been to the Oscars. He's been nominated for an Oscar for a film that he made. All the films he makes are social justice films. He's produced, I think, Being Eñye was maybe his 26th film that he's produced. He's actually been kind of in a producing and directorial role with our stuff the most, but mostly he's the producer or exec producer. If you know about movies, it's almost like exec producer is a little bit of a layer away from the film, but there's been, I think, 6 big films in his kind of repertoire, and he's won the Tribeca Film Festival with one. He's won South by Southwest with another one, went to the Oscars with another one, and the only thing, I feel like he's only not done 2 things. One is win an Oscar and have a film be at Sundance. And so hopefully, knock on wood, we can check those 2 boxes off together. We'll see.
There is more time for all of this, for sure. Any kind of parting thoughts? And so, parting thoughts, period, or parting pitches, but also I want you to feel good. One of the things about this show, of course, I want our audience to feel good, but I want our guests to feel good. So what are you coming away with? What little piece of belonging has maybe been resolved or gained some insight through this conversation today?
Yeah. So here's what's fun about, and what I can take away, and what I've just been thinking about is sometimes it's really, when you go, and this is going to be emotional, when you really go for something in your life, it can feel very lonely, regardless of any level of success. At times it can feel very lonely, and it has to do with, I think, for me personally, having these ginormous aspirations and feeling a million miles away from them, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so being invited here today and seeing how excited everybody here is with the comments and how excited you are to talk to me and having a chance to talk about what I love, fills my cup, even though I'm crying. This is a good thing. I'm okay. I love this stuff. It helps me to understand how I feel. The way I understand how I feel is through talking. So it helps me a lot to be on these and sharing these, especially with someone like you, Enjolie. Thank you. And I'm always just thrilled that people want to listen and want to hear what I have to say. So yeah, that's my biggest takeaway.
Thank you. Well, yes, we absolutely want to listen. And, as is my way, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming onto the show. I want to thank you on behalf of the audience. And I want to be really personal with you of that. I admire your work. I admire who you are. And it's really, and I'm hesitating. I am distinctly not calling you my friend only because I want to be careful with that term. You feel so like somebody I admire so much that feels like, oh my gosh, how can I even call her my friend? We've only talked to her these few times, but it is because you do what I want to be, meaning are able to push past that vulnerability, are able to kind of be authentic, are able to kind of say who you are. And so I just appreciate you, and anytime that you feel small or you're not doing it well or right, I want you to know that I look up to you in the way that you're operating.
Thank you. And I think we can officially call ourselves friends. So let's just get that out of the way. And thanks so much for saying that too. Yeah.
That was the worst, basically asking someone out to do this. What's funny is I'm usually direct, and that wasn't the intention, but I'm usually direct, and I'll just be like, hey, you want to be my friend?
Wow.
So we're friends. Okay.
Officially, it's official.
Denise and I are friends. Okay. All right, y'all. I just want to let you all know that next week we're back on at 6 p.m. And in preparation for the world worlding is what I'm calling it. In preparation for the world worlding and the fact that we're going to have Inauguration Day on the 20th, I am bringing on Roy Tatum. He is the president of the East Valley chapter here in Arizona of the NAACP. He has previously worked on other political campaigns, for us to discuss whatever the world is going to do. So that's what we'll talk about next Friday. Everyone, treat yourself really well this weekend. Be kind to yourself. Share this information. Go watch the movie and watch Project Eñye or Eñye the movie. Watch it with your family and have these conversations. And let us know what you think about it. So, all right, everyone, have a beautiful weekend.
Bye.